I'd like to think I'm a pretty ordinary guy. I've worked hard my whole life, always believed in doing things the right way, and I've been married to Laura for nearly 3 decades. We built a life together, raised 2 kids who are now off creating their own lives, and I thought we'd grow old side by side. That's the picture I had in my head anyway. Maybe that's why it felt like such a gut punch when I discovered the truth. It all started on a Tuesday morning, the kind of day where the air is crisp and the coffee is just strong enough to kickstart your bones. I was sifting through our emails, something I did out of habit. Laura and I shared an email account, mostly for bills and other mundane life stuff. That's when I saw it, an email from a payroll company with Laura's name on it. At first, it didn't register as anything out of the ordinary, but curiosity got the better of me, so I opened it. The subject line read, "Your recent pay stub." My heart started thumping like a drum. I clicked it open and there it was, clear as day. Laura had been receiving paychecks from some company I'd never heard of. The pay stubs dated back months, and each one had her taking home a nice chunk of change. It didn't make sense. We never talked about her getting another job. We didn't need the money, and she always claimed she was busy enough with her volunteer stuff and social clubs. As I sat there staring at the screen, a heavy feeling settled in my gut. It wasn't just the money, it was the secrets. If she'd been hiding this from me, what else didn't I know? I picked up my phone and scrolled through messages, past and present. I started noticing little gaps and inconsistencies, things I'd brushed off as unimportant at the time, but now seemed like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't quite put together. For days I kept the discovery to myself, simmering in a mix of anger and hurt. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she squirreling away money for a reason? Was there someone else? I couldn't bring myself to confront her without knowing more, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I started sleuthing. I went through her drawers, her desktop files, even her pocketbook when she was in the shower. The more I looked, the more uneasy I felt. There were receipts for dinners at places we'd never been to together, little notes with meetings scribbled on them, and even a second phone I found hidden in the back of her closet. I was down the rabbit hole now, and each new discovery made my heart ache a little more. Then one night, as I lay awake while Laura slept soundly beside me, I decided it was time. I needed answers. I needed to know who this woman really was and what the hell was going on. "Laura," I said the next morning over breakfast, keeping my tone as steady as I could. "I found something odd in our email. Care to explain why there's a payroll company sending you checks?" Her face went pale, and she set down her fork carefully, as if deciding her next move. She was always good at that, thinking on her feet. But in that moment, I could see the facade cracking. "It's just a side project," she said, finally meeting my gaze. "Something small, I was going to tell you." Her voice was calm, rehearsed almost, and that's when it hit me. She'd been preparing for this. "A side project?" I asked, my voice betraying the storm of emotions inside me. "Laura, this isn't just pocket money. This is thousands of dollars. What's going on?" She sighed, a sound filled with resignation and something else I couldn't quite place. Deceit, maybe. "I wanted to have something of my own," she said, not meeting my eyes this time. In case things didn't work out. In case things didn't work out. Those words echoed in my head, each syllable a dagger. Our life, our marriage, was it all just a contingency plan for her? The betrayal felt like a weight on my chest, squeezing the air out of me. I wanted to yell, to demand more answers, but all I could do was sit there numb. We went through the motions of the day, a silent agreement to pretend nothing had happened, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. That night I lay awake again, the silence of the house pressing down on me. I couldn't let it go. The next morning I called in sick to work, feeling anything but fine. I spent the day gathering paperwork, scrutinizing every detail of our finances that I could lay hands on, and there it was again, discrepancies, funds moved around, accounts I hadn't known existed. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Laura had been planning this for a long time. And then, in a moment of blind fury, I decided I wouldn't let her get away with it. I was going to untangle her web of lies and deceit, no matter how deep it went. Because if there was one thing I'd learned, it was that in the end, everyone has to pay the price for their actions. And Laura, she was about to meet hers. I spent those first few days in a haze, feeling like I was walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Laura and I had been married for so long that I couldn't even remember what life had been like before her. And now, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone was a stranger to me. I felt like I was living with an imposter, someone who'd been wearing a mask for God knows how long. After our initial conversation at breakfast, the atmosphere in our home changed. The safe haven I'd come to rely on was now a battlefield of silent accusations and wounded pride. We tiptoed around each other, careful not to let our anger spill over into arguments that would force us to confront the truth. But I was seething beneath the surface, and I knew I couldn't let this go. I took a day off from work again and decided to dig deeper. I knew that if Laura had gone to such lengths to hide things from me, there had to be more. I needed to know exactly how deep her betrayal went. I started by contacting the payroll company, hoping to get more information. I posed as Laura's assistant. Yes, a bit unethical, but I was desperate. After a few rounds of phone calls and some charming persuasion, I managed to get some details about her supposed side project. It turned out Laura wasn't working on any legitimate project. The company she was receiving payments from was a shell, nothing more than a front for something else. This wasn't just about money. This was a full-blown scheme. My mind reeled with possibilities. Was she laundering money? Involved in some kind of fraud? With every theory that crossed my mind, the pit in my stomach deepened. I needed to confront Laura again, but this time I wanted to be fully armed with the truth. I needed leverage, a way to ensure she couldn't talk her way out of this. I hired a private investigator. It felt like a drastic measure, but I was beyond the point of trusting my own judgment. The investigator worked quickly, and within days I had a dossier in my hands. It was full of photos, documents, and timelines that painted a picture of a woman I didn't recognize. Laura had indeed been living a double life. She wasn't just squirreling away money for herself. She was involved with another man. His name was Greg, and he was a well-to-do businessman from across town. They'd met through one of her volunteer events and had been seeing each other for over a year. The dinners she'd gone to, the meetings scribbled on her notes, they were all with him. The investigators' report detailed their escapades, weekend getaways, expensive dinners, even a rented apartment where they'd meet up. It was all meticulously documented, and yet it still didn't feel real. My wife had been living a lie, and I was the fool who'd been left in the dark. That evening I sat at the kitchen table with the dossier spread out in front of me. I waited for Laura to come home, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. When she walked through the door, I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, but I had no sympathy left. It was time to confront her with everything I knew. "Laura," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we need to talk." She looked at me, and for the first time in weeks I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew what was coming. I pushed the dossier toward her, pointing at the incriminating evidence. "Who is Greg?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Her face drained of color, and she slumped into a chair. For a moment I thought she might deny it, try to weave another web of lies. But instead, she just looked at the papers, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm sorry," she said, and there was a rawness to her voice that almost made me believe she meant it. "Sorry?" I replied, my voice rising with every word. "For lying? For cheating? For planning a whole other life behind my back?" She wiped her eyes, finally meeting my gaze. "I never meant for it to get this far. It started out as something harmless. I didn't realize how unhappy I was until I met him." Her words stung, each one a reminder of how little I'd known about the state of our marriage. I wanted to lash out, to make her feel the same pain she'd inflicted on me, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. "What about the money, Laura? What was all of that about?" She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Greg. He promised me a new beginning. I was saving up so I could leave, without having to rely on you or anyone else. The truth of it all felt like a sucker punch. Our entire life together had been nothing more than a backup plan for her, a safety net she was ready to cut loose. I realized then that I had a choice to make. I could let this betrayal consume me, let it destroy everything I'd built and believed in, or I could find a way to move forward, to reclaim the life I wanted and deserved. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "and I'm going to make sure you don't get a cent more than you deserve." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand," she whispered. It wasn't the resolution I'd imagined, but it was a start, a chance to rebuild, to find some semblance of peace in the wreckage of my marriage. Because in the end, justice wasn't just about making Laura pay for her actions, it was about finding a way to heal and move on. After our last conversation, the house felt like a mausoleum. All the warmth and memories seemed to vanish overnight, leaving behind only hollow echoes of what used to be. I spent my nights on the couch, unable to face the bed we once shared. It was like sleeping in a room full of ghosts. Laura moved into the guest room. We were still under the same roof, but it felt like we were miles apart. She avoided me mostly, probably out of guilt, or to avoid any more confrontations. I didn't care anymore. My focus was on the next steps. I began the process of filing for divorce the very next day. My lawyer, an old college friend, assured me that given the circumstances, her infidelity and financial scheming, I had a strong case. But the legal side of things was only a fraction of the battle. The real challenge was trying to piece my life back together amidst the chaos. I continued working, burying myself in projects and deadlines. It was the only way to keep my mind from spiraling into darker places. But no matter how busy I kept, the thoughts crept in during quieter moments. The betrayal, the years lost, the nagging question of how I'd been so blind. Weekends were the hardest. With no office to escape to, I found myself wandering through the city, aimlessly walking through parks and crowded streets. Being surrounded by strangers was somehow comforting. Anonymity felt like a refuge. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on a bench in Central Park, watching families and couples pass by. Their laughter and easy camaraderie felt foreign to me, like a language I'd forgotten. That's when I decided I needed help. I couldn't navigate this mess on my own, and I was tired of pretending I could. I reached out to a therapist, someone a colleague had recommended. The first session was awkward, me sitting there, trying to articulate the whirlwind of emotions without breaking down. But it helped, even just saying the words out loud to someone who was there to listen without judgment. Laura, on the other hand, seemed to retreat further into herself. She stopped volunteering, stopped going out entirely. I couldn't bring myself to care about her suffering. Even though some part of me still wanted to, I remembered the woman I fell in love with, not the one who unraveled everything we'd built. But it was like she'd disappeared, leaving only a stranger in her place. The divorce proceedings dragged on for months. Laura didn't fight me on much, which was a relief. I got to keep the house, the car, most of our savings. She took the rented apartment with Greg. It felt like a hollow victory, though. Winning a settlement wasn't going to fill the void she'd left. One evening, shortly after the divorce was finalized, I came home to find a note on the counter. It was from Laura, written on one of those floral notepads she'd always loved. The sight of her handwriting brought an unexpected pang of nostalgia. "I'm leaving," it read. "There's nothing left for me here. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you can find happiness again." There was no address, no phone number, just those few lines. I sat at the kitchen table, the note in my hand, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. It was over, really over. And all that was left was the task of moving forward. The next few months were a blur of new routines and small victories. I redecorated the house, erasing the final traces of our life together. I took up running again, rediscovering a love for something that was just mine. I even started dating, tentatively stepping into the world of online apps and awkward first dates. There were setbacks, of course, nights when I'd wake up reaching for her, dreams that left me with an ache in my chest, but slowly those moments became fewer and farther between. I found solace in friends, family, even in strangers who'd gone through similar experiences. They shared their stories, their scars, their advice, and through them, I began to see that my life wasn't over. It was just beginning a new chapter. Justice, I realized, wasn't about retribution or seeing Laura suffer. It was about reclaiming my life, finding joy in the everyday things I'd taken for granted. It was about learning to trust again, in myself, and in others. Laura's betrayal had shattered the world I knew, but it also forced me to rebuild it stronger, wiser. And in that I found a sense of peace I hadn't expected, a peace that came not from forgetting, but from forgiving, myself most of all. In the end, justice was about finding my way back to myself, and that was a journey worth taking. The first few months post-divorce felt like adjusting to life after a storm. The air was clearer, the chaos had settled, but the landscape had irreversibly changed. I was trying to navigate this new reality, where each day was both a challenge and an opportunity. The weight of the past lingered, but I was learning to embrace the freedom that came with starting over. One evening, after another long day at work, I returned home to find a letter in my mailbox. It was from Greg, the man Laura had left me for. My initial reaction was anger. What more could he possibly want? I considered tossing it in the trash, but curiosity got the better of me. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the envelope, feeling the now familiar pang of anxiety mixed with curiosity. The letter was short, written in hurried script. Greg apologized, taking responsibility for his role in the chaos that had erupted in my life. He wrote about how things didn't turn out as he'd expected either. His relationship with Laura had quickly soured, and he found himself alone, dealing with the fallout of their decisions. He even mentioned that Laura had moved out of their shared apartment, leaving him with the remnants of what could have been, an outcome not too different from my own. Reading his words, I felt an unexpected sense of camaraderie, a shared understanding of loss, even though he had been the catalyst for my own. It was a strange twist of fate, realizing that we were both grappling with the consequences of choices made in moments of weakness and desire. I didn't reply to Greg. I had no desire to open a dialogue or forge any kind of connection, but his letter served as a poignant reminder that everyone involved in this mess had paid a price. It wasn't just my life that was in ruins. The ripple effects of betrayal had touched all of us. In some weird way, it was comforting to know I wasn't the only one trying to piece things back together. As summer gave way to fall, the city transformed into a palette of warm hues, a visual reminder of change and renewal. My job continued to be my anchor, providing a steady rhythm to my days. I poured myself into new projects, seeking purpose in the chaos of deadlines and meetings. I found that the more I invested in my work, the more I regained a sense of control and confidence. Therapy sessions became a weekly ritual I looked forward to. My therapist encouraged me to explore the parts of myself I'd neglected during my marriage. I was rediscovering passions I'd shelved, like painting and running, activities that allowed me to express emotions I couldn't quite articulate. One Saturday morning, I decided to participate in a local charity run. The crisp air invigorated me as I joined the throng of participants at the starting line. The event was raising money for victims of domestic abuse, and as I stood there, surrounded by people running for a cause, I felt a deep connection to something larger than myself. It was a reminder that everyone was fighting their own battles, and in that shared struggle there was strength. The race was grueling, but as I crossed the finish line, I was flooded with a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't about winning. It was about proving to myself that I could start something and see it through, that I could endure and come out stronger on the other side. The runners around me celebrated with cheers and high fives, strangers united by a common goal. That evening, as I soaked my sore muscles in a hot bath, I reflected on the progress I'd made. I was learning to let go of the bitterness, to let gratitude take its place. Gratitude for the lessons, for the resilience I'd discovered within myself, and for the opportunities ahead. It was a slow process, but with each step forward, I felt more like myself, someone I hadn't known in a long time. In the quiet moments, I still thought of Laura. The memories were less painful now, softened by time and acceptance. I hoped she found peace wherever she was. I wished her well, not out of obligation, but because I genuinely wanted us both to move on, free from the shadows of our shared past. Life was beginning to feel less like a series of obstacles and more like a journey with infinite possibilities. I was learning to trust again, not just in others, but in myself. And as the autumn leaves fell, I realized that the future, once shrouded in uncertainty, was now a canvas waiting to be painted with new experiences and adventures. Justice had come not in the form of revenge or recompense, but through the quiet strength found in rebuilding. I was crafting a life that was authentically mine, shaped by the lessons of the past and the promise of what lay ahead. And in that, I found a sense of liberation I hadn't known before, a freedom to be who I was always meant to be. Autumn deepened, painting the world in shades of amber and crimson. I felt an unexpected lightness, a sensation that I was finally stepping forward into a more hopeful chapter of my life. By now, the familiar wounds had started to feel less raw, and the edges of my grief had softened, dulled by the passage of time and introspection. One evening I sat in my living room, the soft glow of a single lamp casting a warm circle of light. I had recently picked up a sketchbook, something I hadn't touched in years. It was a kind of therapy, a way to process feelings that words couldn't quite reach. As the charcoal moved across the page, creating forms and shadows, I felt a sense of creation that was both new and nostalgic. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling me from my reverie. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment, my instinct telling me to ignore it, but curiosity won over. On the other end was a woman named Karen, an attorney who represented a class action lawsuit against a financial advisor, a connection to my past I hadn't expected. You see, one of the many realizations that had emerged after my divorce was that my finances were in shambles. Laura had taken charge of our financial planning, a trust I had naively given. It turned out that the advisor she insisted upon had been siphoning funds through dubious investments, and I wasn't the only victim. Karen explained that they were in the process of gathering accounts of those affected, and my name had come up in the documentation. Hearing this, my mind raced back to the years of marriage, trust misplaced, conversations replayed with newfound clarity, the sense of betrayal deepening like a wound reopened. But this time, rather than rage or despair, I felt a steely resolve. This was a chance to reclaim something that had been taken, an opportunity for justice, not just for myself, but for others who had suffered in silence. I agreed to meet her to discuss my involvement further. It felt like a step forward, not in the direction of vengeance, but of closure. The following week I found myself in Karen's office, a nondescript building downtown, the kind where stories of quiet battles and victories are written. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a reassuring smile, someone who had clearly seen the darker sides of human ambition. As she laid out the details, I realized the scale of deceit was larger than I'd imagined. Dozens of families like mine, ensnared by promises of growth and security, only to be met with ruin. We talked for hours, her questions probing but respectful. I recounted details about our investments, the meetings with our advisor, things I had shoved into the recesses of my memory. With each piece of the puzzle I contributed, the picture of his betrayal became clearer, and alongside it a sense of solidarity with those involved. We were all pieces of a larger whole, united by the quest for justice. Leaving her office, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was strangely invigorating, knowing that I had a role in this, that my experiences could help prevent future harm. It was another step in my healing journey, one that added depth to my own narrative of recovery and resilience. That evening, I stopped by the local coffee shop. The air was crisp, the streets bustling with people wrapped in scarves and laughter. I ordered a brew and found a corner table by the window. Pulling out my sketchbook, I began to draw the scene outside. People moving, leaves swirling in the breeze, life unfolding in its unpredictable beauty. As I sketched, an unexpected thought surfaced, a realization that perhaps this journey was never about returning to what was, but about forging something entirely new. It wasn't about reclaiming lost pieces, but building with what remained, stronger and more authentic. I found myself reflecting on Greg's letter again. I hadn't reached out to him, but I wondered how he was faring. The empathy I felt hadn't vanished, though I knew better than to get entangled in his life. It was enough to wish him well from afar, understanding that we were both characters in a story not of our own making, trying to find our footing. Days turned into weeks, and the class action lawsuit moved forward. Each update from Karen was a reminder of justice in progress, of wrongs being righted, however small the steps might seem. And with each stride I felt lighter, as if the shackles of the past were loosening their grip. Through it all, the city continued its rhythmic dance of seasons, and I found solace in the steadiness of nature's cycles. I embraced the uncertainty of the future, realizing that in its unpredictability lay a peculiar kind of freedom. I was no longer the person I was before, nor did I wish to be. Instead, I was someone in the process of becoming, transforming with each experience, each challenge and triumph, adding layers to my story. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next with open arms, knowing that I had the strength to weather any storm and emerge, not unscathed but beautifully resilient. As winter settled in, the world outside transformed into a canvas of white and grey, a stark contrast to the vibrant autumn that had just passed. There was a certain stillness that came with the snow, a quiet that seemed to hush the chaos of life, allowing space for introspection. I found myself spending more evenings at home, the warmth of a fire crackling in the hearth, its light flickering against the walls. It was during one of those quiet evenings that I received another update from Karen. The lawsuit was progressing, and there was a possibility of a settlement on the horizon. The news was promising, yet I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Justice was within reach, but the scars of betrayal still lingered, a reminder of trust broken and dreams shattered. As the days grew shorter and the nights longer, I turned to my sketchbook even more. The act of drawing had become a refuge, a way to articulate the complexity of my emotions. Each stroke of charcoal on paper was a release, a way to translate the chaos within into something tangible. I found myself drawn to sketching winter scenes, barren trees cloaked in snow, shadows stretching across icy streets, the intricate patterns of frost on windows. It was as if the starkness of the season mirrored the clarity I sought in my own life. One afternoon, while I was at the coffee shop, now a regular sanctuary, I was surprised to see an old friend walk in. Mike and I had lost touch over the years, our lives diverging in ways neither of us had anticipated. Seeing him brought a flood of memories, both bitter and sweet. We exchanged a long overdue hug and settled into conversation over steaming cups of coffee. We talked about everything and nothing, life, work, dreams that had shifted over time. I found myself opening up about the lawsuit and my journey since the divorce, something I hadn't done with many people outside of Karen. To my surprise, Mike listened intently, his empathy palpable. It was a reminder that human connection, even after years apart, could be a powerful balm. As we parted ways, Mike extended an invitation to his upcoming art exhibit. He'd been pursuing photography, capturing the city's myriad moods, and wanted to share it with friends. I promised to attend, genuinely looking forward to reconnecting with old faces and maybe discovering new ones. In the weeks that followed, I felt a gradual shift within myself, a quiet resolve to not just survive, but to thrive. I started considering possibilities that had once seemed out of reach. On a whim, I enrolled in a local art class, eager to refine my skills and connect with others who shared my passion. The class was filled with people of all ages and backgrounds, each bringing their unique perspective to the canvas. It was invigorating, a reminder that creativity was a path to healing and growth. Amidst all this, the updates from Karen continued. The financial advisor at the center of our lawsuit was now facing criminal charges, a development that brought a sense of vindication. Yet, the true victory for me was the realization that I was no longer defined by what had happened, but by how I chose to move forward. On the night of Mike's exhibit, I found myself feeling both excited and nervous. The gallery was a small, intimate space, its walls adorned with Mike's stunning photographs, a testament to his talent and passion. Each image captured a different facet of the city, from its bustling streets to the serene solitude of its parks. As I walked through the exhibit, I felt a renewed sense of connection to the city I called home. Mike introduced me to several of his friends, each with their own stories and journeys. It was refreshing to be surrounded by diverse voices, each conversation a reminder of the resilience and creativity inherent in us all. As the evening wore on, I realized that this was what I had been missing. The simple joy of being part of a community, of forging connections that transcended past hurts. Driving home that night, the city lights blurring into streaks against the dark, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the past that had shaped me, for the challenges that had strengthened me, and for the promise of new beginnings. I was learning to embrace the ebb and flow of life, to find beauty in its imperfections. Winter would eventually give way to spring, the world would thaw, and with it, I too would continue to grow and change. I understood now that life wasn't about erasing the past, but about integrating it into a richer, more nuanced narrative. And as I pulled into my driveway, snow gently falling around me, I knew that whatever the future held, I was ready to face it with open eyes and a willing heart. As the first hints of spring began to tease through the persistent winter chill, I found myself reflecting on how much life had changed since the chaos of the divorce and the betrayal that accompanied it. I woke up one morning to the sound of birds chirping, a small but significant sign that the world was beginning to wake up again. There was a certain irony to it. As nature was poised to bloom, I too felt on the cusp of something new. Karen's latest update had arrived like a splash of cold water. The settlement was almost finalized, and with the financial advisor's criminal charges escalating, it seemed justice was carving its own path. It should have been a moment of triumph, a closing chapter in a long and tumultuous story. Yet as I sat there sipping my coffee, I realized that the victory felt hollow. Not because it wasn't deserved, but because I had come to terms with the fact that no amount of money or legal retribution could reclaim the years spent or the trust lost. This realization didn't bring sorrow. Instead, it fueled a desire in me to build something new from the rubble. That afternoon, I took a solitary walk through the park, my feet crunching on the thawing ground. I stopped at one of the benches, the woods slick with melting snow, and pulled out my sketchbook. It had become my constant companion, a silent witness to my internal battles and victories. I sketched the scene before me, the bare trees beginning to bud, a metaphor for the resilience that life constantly demonstrates, a resilience I was slowly starting to recognize within myself. The art class I'd joined had become a sanctuary. Each session was a journey into expression, an exploration of not just technique, but also identity. Our instructor, a vibrant woman named Teresa, encouraged us to dig deep, to let our emotions guide our hands. "Art is not what you see," she would say, quoting Degas, "but what you make others see." Her words resonated with me. My sketches slowly transformed from cautious lines into bold, expressive works that mirrored my journey from fragmentation to newfound wholeness. One evening after class, I found myself in conversation with a fellow student, a retired schoolteacher named Ellen. We struck up a friendship, bonded by a shared appreciation for creativity as a form of catharsis. Ellen had her own stories of heartache and resilience, and our conversations often stretched long into the night over cups of herbal tea. She became a mentor of sorts, her life experiences offering perspective and wisdom that I eagerly absorbed. Amidst this newfound community and creative exploration, I decided to take a leap of faith. With encouragement from Mike and Ellen, I planned a small exhibition of my work. It felt daunting exposing the raw and personal journey captured on my canvas, but there was an undeniable thrill in the act of sharing. I chose a cozy gallery downtown, one that Mike had recommended. The owner, a genial man named Henry, welcomed me with open arms, excited to showcase a fresh voice in the local art scene. As the date of the exhibit approached, I immersed myself in preparation. Each piece I selected told a part of my story, from the chaotic, swirling lines of confusion and anger to the serene, contemplative winter landscapes that symbolized healing. Naming the collection was an exercise in authenticity. I called it Fragments of Resilience, a tribute to the journey I'd embarked upon, one that had transformed brokenness into strength. The night of the exhibit arrived with a flurry of nerves and anticipation. The gallery filled with friends, old and new, Mike, Ellen, Karen, and even some classmates from the art class. Each familiar face was a reminder of how far I'd come and the community that had buoyed me along the way. As I stood there amidst my work and surrounded by supportive souls, I felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. People moved through the gallery, pausing to absorb the stories woven into each stroke and shade. There were moments of laughter, shared memories, and quiet reflection. Karen approached me as the evening drew on, her eyes filled with pride and warmth. "You've turned your pain into something beautiful," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. It was a compliment that resonated deeply, affirming the transformation I'd undergone. As the night wound down and the last guests trickled out, I lingered in the gallery, letting the events of the evening settle over me like a warm embrace. Mike stayed behind to help clean up, a gesture that reminded me of the friendship we'd rekindled. Together we moved through the space, our conversation easy and filled with plans for the future, potential collaborations, more exhibits, maybe even a joint project. Driving home, the city lights blinking in the distance, I found myself marveling at the capacity for human connection and healing. Life, I had learned, was not about erasing past wounds, but embracing them as part of a greater tapestry. With the promise of spring in the air and the warmth of community at my back, I felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that I was no longer defined by my past, but by the rich, resilient life I was actively building. The drive home from the gallery was surreal, a gentle hum of the engine accompanying my thoughts. The headlights of oncoming cars streaked past like fleeting moments of the past I was learning to leave behind. I felt a sense of closure, yet an eagerness for what was to come. It wasn't just about starting anew, it was about integrating every piece of my journey into the person I was becoming. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds, painting the walls with warm hues that felt like a promise. I stretched, feeling a rare sense of contentment. The exhibition had been a success, not in terms of accolades or sales, but in reclaiming my narrative. I made my way to the kitchen, the familiar aroma of fresh coffee brewing, a comforting ritual I'd come to cherish. Sitting at the kitchen table, I opened the newspaper out of habit. A headline caught my eye. "Local financial advisor faces maximum sentence." It was about Andrew, the advisor who had swindled so many, including me. The justice system was finally catching up with him, ensuring he faced repercussions for his actions. A part of me wanted to feel triumphant, yet all I felt was an odd sense of peace. Like a book I'd finally finished reading, Andrew's chapter in my life was over. The phone rang, snapping me out of my reverie. It was Ellen, her voice as bright as the morning itself. "I was just thinking about last night," she began, "and how wonderful it was to see your art come alive. You should be proud." "I am," I admitted, the words feeling both foreign and genuine in my mouth. "Thank you for being there, Ellen. Your support means more than I can say." We spent the next few minutes chatting about anything and everything. Plans for the weekend, a new art exhibit downtown, the best recipe for lavender scones. It was a simple conversation, but it reaffirmed the importance of the connections I was nurturing. After we hung up, I lingered in the quiet of my apartment, contemplating the road ahead. With the divorce and subsequent chaos behind me, I felt a newfound freedom to explore possibilities that had once seemed impossible. My mind wandered to the idea of teaching art, sharing the cathartic power of creation with others who might need it as much as I once did. That afternoon, I decided to visit the local community center. The building, a modest structure nestled between a library and a park, exuded a sense of familiarity and warmth. Inside, I found a bustling hive of activity, children laughing in the gymnasium, seniors enjoying a game of cards in the lounge, and a bulletin board filled with flyers for various classes and workshops. I approached the reception desk, where a friendly woman named Janice greeted me. "How can I help you today?" she asked, her smile infectious. "I was wondering if you have any openings for art instructors," I replied, feeling a spark of excitement at the prospect. She nodded, her eyes lighting up. "We're always looking for passionate people to lead classes. Do you have a proposal in mind?" "I do," I said, pulling out my sketchbook. I explained my idea, a class focused on using art as a means of healing and self-expression, open to anyone looking for a creative outlet. Janice listened intently, nodding in encouragement. By the end of our conversation, I felt hopeful and inspired, a plan forming that I was eager to put into action. In the following weeks, I devoted myself to crafting the curriculum, drawing from my own experiences and the lessons I'd learned along the way. Each class would be a journey, not just in technique, but in introspection, helping participants to unlock their emotions and translate them into art. Word spread quickly, and before long I had a small group of eager participants signed up. Our first session was both nerve-wracking and exhilarating. As we gathered in the airy sunlit room, I introduced myself and shared a bit of my story, hoping to set the tone for openness and vulnerability. The class was a diverse mix of individuals, college students, retirees, a young mother seeking an escape from the demands of everyday life. We began with simple exercises, using charcoal and pastels to explore lines and shapes, gradually building to more complex projects. Throughout the weeks, I watched as the group transformed, not only in their artistic abilities, but in their comfort with one another. Our sessions became a sanctuary, a space where people could express themselves without fear of judgment. There were moments of laughter, shared stories of struggle and triumph, and a camaraderie that blossomed from our collective pursuit of healing through art. One evening, as I was tidying up after class, a young woman named Lily approached me. She held a piece she'd been working on, a vibrant, swirling abstract that seemed to pulse with energy. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "This class has been life-changing. I never realized how much I needed this." Her words resonated deeply. I realized that in creating this space for others, I had also found my own healing. It was a reminder of the transformative power of creativity, how it could take the fragments of our lives and weave them into something beautiful and whole. As I drove home that night, the city lights twinkling like stars on the horizon, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey I'd undertaken. The road had been fraught with challenges, but it had led me to a place of peace and purpose I hadn't dared to dream of. And for the first time in a long time, I could look to the future with anticipation, knowing that whatever lay ahead, I was ready to embrace it with open arms.